Hey, what's up?
Hey Caleb, I knew you were looking forward to performing at the Riyadh Comedy Festival next year, but Saudi officials are putting that on hold after they saw your browser history.
Oh man! I was really looking forward to performing at the Riyadh Comedy Festival next year in Saudi Arabia. Bill Burr, Kevin Hart, Pete Davidson, and plenty more of the comedy industry's top talent have recently faced sanctimonious outrage, a brunt of public outrage for traveling to Saudi Arabia to a comedy festival called the Riyadh Comedy Festival, all in exchange for, you guessed it, money. Saudi Arabia is no stranger to controversy. People are upset for many reasons in regard to this entire thing. Okay, guys, and this is almost a drama video, kind of, but it's actually a crazy, dark rabbit hole deep dive into Saudi Arabia and why it maybe is not a place that you should really go. Or, especially not do journalism there. It's not even funny. I should not have laughed. It is a fucked up place. In recent years, Saudi Arabia transformed from an international pariah to an entertainment destination through billions of dollars in investments. But in spite of that, the kingdom still continues systematic executions. It imprisons peaceful activists and criminalizes free speech, which not every country in the world has free speech, and even we don't have free speech. To be honest, in Texas, we don't even have it. We kind of do. You, wheelchair guy. Not you. So it seems like the 2025 Riyadh Comedy Festival is a bit of a cultural washing experiment or strategy from the Saudis. Running from September 25th through October 8th, it featured Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart, and 50 other major comedians. And the strategy was to recruit champions of free expression comedians to perform under censorship for a regime that executes people for exercising the very freedoms comedians build their lives upon, and probably, I would assume, should be the most vocal advocates for. It's crazy that this is an issue in the world, though, for real. Like, there's a country that comedians will perform at that's just bad. Well, I guess America's not. Anyways, yeah, we're in the weeds. I'm sorry. Now, this contradiction is particularly stark given Saudi Arabia's documented human rights abuses, its extensive connections to 9/11, and the murder, recent, 7 years ago, of Jamal Khashoggi, whose 7th death anniversary coincided with the festival. By the way, Jamal was assassinated at the behest of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia during that time. This guy. So, understanding the recent Riyadh comedy drama requires examining the full scope of Saudi Arabia's human rights violations and its deliberate strategy to rehabilitate its global image through comedy, I guess, comedians, which is an interesting way to do it. A lot of things are happening through comedy nowadays, all right, guys? The jester's privilege, they call it. So yeah, we need to understand all this stuff to get why people are so mad, and then make the decision, they're just being sanctimonious assholes. They're just doing whatever or whatever, like, who, yeah, you know, let's find out. Go to gump.club to learn from me. I'm starting a Discord server. Nothing will go wrong, and we will provide a lot of different benefits, such as these, at gump.club. For example, have you ever wondered the kind of stuff we cut out of videos, which is a lot of stuff? Because I am an insane person who cannot be trusted to say things that are normal. All that and more at gump.club. Also, access to our extremely private XXX secret adult Discord server. Just kidding, it's totally normal. It's completely normal, I shouldn't say that. Heavily moderated, can't actually express yourself. But I'll be in there occasionally, probably not. Tara will definitely be in there. The editor and matriarch of the YouTube channel, who has been with my channel for 7 years, is chronically online and is, I think, in the Discord server right now.
Hello.
How you doing, Tara?
Good, how are you doing, Caleb?
I'm filming an advertisement for gump.club right now, and part of the advertisement is that you'll be in the server.
Wow, what a good deal.
Exactly. You heard it from the horse's mouth. Tara's awesome. If you don't join the Gump Club, then I'll fire her. She has it coming. Thank you for Gump for sponsoring.
It's not, is it me? It's me though. It's not really a sponsor, is it? Thank you to the Gum Club for sponsoring this video.
We got to go way back. The House of Saud's 280-year alliance with Wahhabism shapes every aspect of Saudi governance and justifies the systematic discrimination against religious minorities and women and gay people. In 1744, Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab formed a pact with Muhammad bin Saud in the desert town of Diriyah. Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab was a puritanical Islamic reformer who condemned shrine worship, saint veneration, and Sufi practices as polytheism. Now known as Wahhabism, it is a Sunni belief system. I'm not going to go too far into it. The denominations of Islam are very interesting and they run quite deep. But anyways, the power-sharing Wahhabism arrangement endures today in Saudi Arabia. The Al Saud family controls political and military affairs, while Al-Ashik descendants, Ibn Abd al-Wahhab's family, dominate the religious institutions of Saudi Arabia. Provided through Wahhabism is the ideological justification for Saudi expansion through violent campaigns, as those who followed the Wahhabi doctrine would wage jihad against anyone who rejects the creed. They have a understanding of inerrancy towards the Quran, and everything is literal. It's a very strict, once again, puritanical ideology and/or religion. Ideology belonging to a religion. When Abdulaziz bin Abdul Rahman, aka Ibn Saud, known to the rest of the world, the first king of Saudi Arabia, he launched his initial 1902 reconquest to establish the modern Saudi Arabia. He created the Ikhwan religious military brotherhood in 1912 that proved crucial for unifying the kingdom by 1932. And thus began the reign of Ibn Saud. And now in the world, most everybody knows Saudi Arabia from its massive reserves of oil and its ability to sell that oil. And the transformation for Saudi Arabia from desert kingdom to an oil superpower began all the way back on March 3rd, 1938, when commercial quantities of oil began flowing from Daman Well number 7, which became known as the Prosperity Well, or Lucky 7, because it produced 32 million barrels of oil before its closure in 1982. I tell you what, man, that's a lot of oil. What the fuck? The Standard Oil Company of California established the Arabian American Oil Company, aka Aramco, in 1944, which Saudi Arabia gradually nationalized until it became 100% state-owned in the 1980s. Today, Saudi Aramco produces over 10 million barrels of oil daily and has generated an estimated $480 billion this year alone. Oh! And once again, it's a kingdom. There's a royal family. The royal family's wealth is estimated at $1.4 trillion. You think Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos are rich? That's a joke, brother. All of this wealth is thanks to the state-owned oil empire's success, which grants them virtually unlimited monies and enables them to host massive, globally enjoyed events like the Riyadh Comedy Festival. Amongst many other things. Most of this comes from Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund. It is once again state-owned, but is also a sovereign wealth fund that is used to diversify the nation's domestic and international investments away from solely oil, which is a resource that will run out eventually. I assume. I don't really know how it works. But I pink. And I pink, therefore I am. So the PIF is under the control of Saudi Arabia's Council of Economic and Development Affairs, aka the CEDA, of which Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is the chairman. This means that the PIF is an arm of the Saudi monarchy, and the way that this sovereign investment fund will use its money will align with the Crown Prince's political and economic agendas, such as Vision 2030, which claims to seek the creation of a vibrant society for all citizens to thrive and pursue passions, and to create a thriving economy where everyone has the opportunity to succeed. It's an ambitious nation committed to accountability and transparency at all levels. Brought to you by Saudi Arabia. So I don't trust a word of that shit. Reminds me of that time Akon wanted to build a damn city in Africa. Remember that? That was funny as too, man. Come on, man. I'll be real. Akon City went hard. I'm still all ed up on the fact that that did not work out. I have so many Akon bucks. Anyways, back to the Saudis. One particularly grand plan for the campaign is the construction of a linear city in the sky called The Line. It is a concept right out of science fiction. A city built 500 meters above ground, 1,600 feet, probably 400 yards, 400 and 409, 411 yards, probably 520 yards, 511, 500, and this thing's within a mirrored wall. I don't know why they want to build this shit, but it looks crazy. There's no way it's gonna work. The city is planned to be 170 kilometers long, featuring no cars, 100% renewable energy, vertical gardens, and easily commutable zones that, when combined, will be able to house 9 million people. The line, as it's called, is supposed to be just one of 5 regions in the greater project called NEOM, which is a self-described new future or a vision for a new way of living, brought to you by the government of Saudi Arabia. The vision will cost an estimated $500 billion to complete, with construction already underway. And it looks like this. This new way of living has a YouTube channel where it criticizes humanity for existing too long in dysfunctional and polluted cities, claiming to be able to revolutionize civilization with the help of oil, I guess.
For too long, humanity has existed within dysfunctional and polluted cities that ignore nature. Now, a revolution in civilization is taking place.
So yes, very beautiful concept, but what happens when we examine it slightly? We'll find out that it's built upon human suffering! And that's not good. So Vision 2030 sounds pretty promising, but what concrete steps are being taken to make this thing a reality? Is the vision just for appearances? Is the Riyadh Comedy Festival a part of this thing? Well, back to the PIF. It has already invested over $60 billion across sports and entertainment from 2016 to 2025 with no signs of slowing down. They are working hard to make Saudi Arabia the crown jewel of the Middle East. People call this use of money to get sports and entertainment to come here sports washing. And the Live Golf represents the crown jewel of Saudi sports washing. My dog's growling at me right now. Are you okay? What's wrong with you? The PIF is currently investing billions to create a rival golf league to the PGA, trying to poach top PGA Tour players with astronomical mega kick-style contracts. Phil Mickelson, a pro golfer with 6 major championship wins, an inductee to the Golf Hall of Fame and winner of 45 PGA Tours, was reportedly offered $200 million from Live Golf. He even apologized to the Saudi regime after calling them scary motherfuckers who execute people over there for being gay. Those are his actual quotes that he apologized for. What in the Dustin Johnson, a 2-time major champion, joined Live Golf after a reported $125 million deal. Hey, bud. Shit. What in the That's a lot of money. The PGA had previously called Live a brazen Saudi-funded affront and had even exchanged lawsuits with Live, but ultimately couldn't be a foreign government with unlimited funds. Instead, in June of 2023, a merger was announced between the PGA Tour and Live.
PGA and European tours have agreed to merge with Saudi-backed rival Live Golf.
That was quite shocking as these rivals suddenly became business partners. And by the way, golf. How about racing? Formula One brought global motorsports to Saudi Arabia starting in December of 2021 with a $55 million a year deal. The PIF had allegedly even eyed a $20 billion deal to buy F1 outright. They didn't fully acquire F1, but they have invested $758 million into the McLaren group. So I'm not a big F1 guy. People love it and they're like, it's amazing. The cars are even louder than NASCAR. And sometimes they turn right. Fuck. I don't know shit about any sports nonsense bullshit. You'll never be able to get me to love it, and you can all go f yourselves. So you have the PIF investing in all of this sports stuff, and you also have state-owned Saudi Aramco, separately from the PIF, becoming one of the most prominent sponsors of F1 with a 10-year deal worth over $450 million aimed at connecting the company to a worldwide audience of 500 million racing fans. What? There's that many people in the world? What in the The March 2022 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix proceeded despite a Houthi missile striking an Aramco facility just 9 miles from the Jeddah circuit during practice. Drivers spotted black smoke from the Houthi missile and considered boycotting before being persuaded to race by F1 leaders and Saudi officials, aka more money. Ah, shit, man. That would suck if a Saudi missile crashed down on an F1 track. One F1 driver, Lewis Hamilton, who is very famous and well-known, and is also a defender of human rights issues, apparently, even adopted to wear a helmet decked in LGBT plus colors as a form of unapologetic racing protest. And I've got to say, that is quite a contrast to old Phil Mickelson on that golf side for literally apologizing after getting a $200 million contract. He apologized for calling out the execution of gays. Lewis even won the inaugural Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Still, though, a mass execution months later saw 81 people put to death in the country's largest mass execution in years, reminding the world that while the Saudi regime was trying to elevate its reputation through its investments, they are also still murdering people. Now on to soccer, or as I'm gonna call it, football. Saudi Arabia's PIF purchased an 80% stake in Newcastle United in 2021, which that means nothing to me, but apparently it's a big ass deal. And all this in spite calls from Amnesty International for the Premier League, which is the league that the team plays on, to conduct due diligence on human rights records before accepting the deal. You know, all the people that the Saudi Arabian government is just murdering. And even in spite of having all that Saudi oil money, Newcastle United still hasn't seen a major domestic trophy in 70 years, which is embarrassing as. And this may also be why the Saudi PIF is rumored to be considering a sale of Newcastle to fund purchasing the much more successful Manchester United, which they win, I think. I've heard of them. Man City. You've heard of Ronaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo. He became the face of Saudi football, signing with Al Nassr in December of 2022 for a 2.5-year contract that was recently renewed until 2027, and this thing is worth potentially $700 million, making Ronaldo the first billionaire soccer player, which is quite impressive, but also up. All this set a precedent that dozens of stars would follow as the Saudi Pro League saw players transfer from various football clubs for various fees, or even as free transfers just because they wanted the chance to maybe get a little bit of that Saudi tit milk. The 2034 FIFA World Cup has also been awarded to Saudi Arabia, which proves that there is nothing money can't buy in sports. Saudi Arabia's dream is to host the World Cup within their futuristic city, The Line, with Neom Stadium, estimated to cost $1 billion to construct and being just one of 15 planned stadiums for the tournament. 15 stadiums? That's crazy. So there's that. And even domestically, here in the US, sports washing of Saudi Arabia is commonplace. Nobody even knows. Take, for example, the WWE.
Visibly drunk and spitting at people in the audience.
Beginning in 2018, the WWE has enjoyed a quite fruitful relationship with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, with a 10-year-long deal where the WWE would travel to Saudi Arabia to perform. And the WWE loves money, so it was only a matter of time. But get this, fellows. Women wrestlers were initially banned entirely, with the first women's match not occurring until October 31st, 2019. That was some scary Halloween shit. And even when women were allowed to wrestle, it was still under stringent rules, obviously, because it's a different culture, a different ideology, and money can buy anything. Women had to change their attire to perform in a country where women are supposed to be dressed entirely from head to toe. And one time, the WWE accidentally played a promotional video that showcased female wrestlers in their more exposed clothing, which led to Saudi Arabia apologizing for the indecent visuals. Also, this horrifying Halloween event marked the first time women in Saudi Arabia were allowed to attend the WWE and the events there. And with this accidental use of the wrong video, it ended up exposing all of these Saudi women to the freedoms enjoyed by women in Western cultures, aka getting down to yo skivvies and wrestling motherfuckers. But maybe it wasn't an accident, though. I don't know, guys. While the billions being shelled out in the sports sector is crazy as the gaming sector, I care a lot more about. Me like video games, and it's even way more unbelievable. Okay, guys? I would say gaming is the most ambitious investment sector for the Saudis. The PIF's Savvy Games Group announced a $37.8 billion investment strategy in September of 2022, with roughly $13.3 billion earmarked for acquiring a leading game publisher. think of 5 leading game publishers. The first one you think of is the one that Saudi Arabia bought. But anyways, before we get there, this PIF has been taking over the gaming world behind the scenes, and most people have no idea. PIF's Savvy purchased Scopely for $4.9 billion in 2023, giving them control of Monopoly. I knew you guys would think of that one first. They also bought Niantic's gaming division for $3.5 billion, giving them control of Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go and spy on women and gay people. There are quite a few more gaming companies that the PIF is buying shares of and will likely be looking to expand their holdings in the coming years. They're currently the largest outside stakeholder in Nintendo, holding over 8% ownership. They own 3.5% of Take-Two, which is the company that owns Rockstar and 2K, which those also sit above many dev companies, for example, Gearbox. They hold 2% of Activision Blizzard and 5% of Capcom and Nexon Games. So just because they own these publicly traded companies doesn't mean that they own them. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's still people, but they have to listen to shareholders. Okay, so there's an argument to be made, but it just drives a wedge further between consumers and transparency of the games that they're playing and the games that they're buying. Now, I said they'll probably seek to expand their ownership. They did. They do, and they will. You know, EA, that's right. The loving video game developer who's been making games like Madden for the last 5,000 years and other games. They've made a lot of really good stuff, and they've made a lot of really dog shit stuff. EA, it's in the game, announced on September 29th, 2025, just a few weeks ago, that they were agreeing to a deal that would see them being acquired by the Consortium, which is essentially a group of investors, including Silver Lake, Affinity Partners, and you guessed it, my friends, the PIF, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. Man, come on, man. What the f? They can't do that, can they? Now, before the deal, the PIF had held a 9.9% stake in EA, but under the terms of the agreement, the new agreement with the consortium, they'd be one of 3 companies that would now own 100% of Electronic Arts, with their 9.9% holding and rolling over. So now, the big question is, it's a publicly traded company. You could just invest in EA for a long time. What does that mean for stockholders? Well, it means that they will all be getting paid $210 in cash per share that they own, which is an epic win, I guess. Before this announcement, it was trading at around $168 a share, so they were paid a premium, like quite a big premium, but still, I mean, you invest in things because you love the company and all this stuff, and they can just decide, well, actually, now we're owned by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia owns us right now, which is pretty epic, to be honest. Unless you're not a Saudi. Sucks for individual shareholders, I guess, but the leadership at EA has been known for quite a while now and has been notorious for making poor decisions when it comes to their games and the consumers of their games. So I can't imagine their games will see any improvement under the thumb, or at least 1/3 of the thumb, of Crown Prince bin Salman. All right, guys? That seems like kind of a recipe for disaster. They're also now involved in esports through the establishment of the Esports World Cup, formerly known as Gamers 8, which is offering $60 million in prize money, which is the largest prize in esports history. Then, of course, there is the recent Riyadh Comedy Festival, where comedians are trading their reputations for a little bit of money. For example, Tim Dillon got paid like $500,000 or $300,000, or was going to get paid. I'm not sure if he actually went or not. I didn't really follow up on that clip. I saw that clip where he was talking about how much money they offered him. He's gay. I'm surprised they don't just not even give him the money and just kill him. At least I think he's gay. I don't really know. But I figured it'd be more money. I figured it'd be like 10 mil per, but I guess there's a lot of different folks. Like Dave Chappelle's probably like a couple million, and Tim Dillon is definitely smaller. I mean, you can just watch his podcast for free. But yeah, the Riyadh drew quite a bit of scrutiny, but it's not the first festival that was hosted in Saudi Arabia that did draw scrutiny. For example, Mildebeest's music festival. Soundstorm drew massive talent from the music industry to Saudi Arabia in a similar fashion to what the Riyadh Comedy Festival has done in the comedy industry. Back in 2019, Mildebeest, I'm just gonna keep calling it that because I think it's funny and I think it's a good name. This festival drew Steve Aoki, David Guetta, and more Western talent, with Armie Hammer facing backlash for his attendance and defending the event against critics. Hey man, Armie Hammer has had to do a lot of defending against critics. I'm gonna be real, that Mildebeest controversy ain't the most of his worries. It's the cannibalism. He even said that it felt like a cultural shift and was accused of selling out to rehabilitate the country's image. Why the f would you want to rehabilitate any country's image? Countries can go themselves. Literally. Every people who live in the country, who's proud of their country? How's that even possible to be proud? Just be happy with your family and your friends and your local community, maybe, all right? Where I live, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any crazy transgressions in maybe the last 70 years, maybe 40 years. Let's make it 40. How about since I've lived here, it's been really good and awesome, and there's people of all shapes and sizes. Lots of different sizes. The Mildebeest event has only gotten bigger over the years, with 2024's lineup featuring 25 international artists like 30 Seconds to Mars, A$AP Rocky, Eminem, The Reformed Linkin Park, and also Bobby Driscoll and the Drooly Boys. Just kidding, but maybe one day.
Frankie, oh, you're so ugly.
So those are just the major stars in attendance. The scale of the Mildebeest Festival dwarfs Western festivals because the government has unlimited funds to invest in anything that portrays them positively. It's gigantic, but it, like the Riyadh, has been sanctimoniously crucified and criticized. For example, in 2021, critics of the festival referred to the funds used to pay artists as blood money. This thing called the General Entertainment Authority, or the GEA, funds the Mildebeest Festival, with Turki Al-Sheikh serving as the chairman. And I'm sure he's a great guy. His name is Turki. Turki Al-Sheikh is closely associated with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and he is advisor to the royal court on top of his chairmanship over the GEA, and he wields his power with an iron fist, my friends. For example, in the past, he has taken to Twitter to threaten legal action against people who criticize the GEA, and even had a man imprisoned for 19 years over posting tweets critical of his decision-making 18 months before ever moving to Saudi Arabia for work. That was back in 2021. Are you kidding me? I remember in 2014 or 2015, I had friends who tried to find welding contracts and jobs in Saudi Arabia. They're like, dude, it's crazy out there. They're just paying you $50 an hour to weld. I'm like, can women drive though? I've been critical of Saudi Arabia for quite a long time. And about Dubai. I've been on that Dubai shit list for quite a while as well. Also in 2021, there were female Mildebeest attendees who reported repeated sexual harassment and even encounters with groups of men who were sexually assaulting them, groping them, etc. And the event, the Mildebeest, launched a respect campaign. So rather than actually trying to stop the issue on the field, Turki Al-Sheikh was more interested in stopping people from talking about it online, and warnings were issued to stop spreading baseless rumors or face 5 years of imprisonment. Do not lie! Face 5 years of imprisonment. Blocked on Twitter. Al-Sheikh even reportedly made social media posts mocking those who claimed to be abused, which is another level of bullshittery. The women who posted online about facing harassment faced 5 years in prison. And you can compare that to the law passed in 2018, where the ones actually committing the sexual harassment would face only 2 years in prison, or 5 years if they were a repeat offender. So saying, hey, I went to this place and it was really unsafe, gets you as much time in prison as being a repeat sexual deviant. Okay, that's cool. We've also seen reporting that Turki Al-Sheikh had posted a photo in 2024 with Saud Al-Qahtani, which is the man accused of being responsible for the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. Still, despite our best efforts, we couldn't find the photo itself, so obviously take that with a grain of salt. People are very, very, very critical of Saudi Arabia, and I'm not saying anybody's making anything up, but I'm also saying wouldn't be surprised as well. At the same time, these people don't seem like they are good people. But don't pay attention to that. Instead, look at these awesome posts. Is that Grogu? And yes, to answer the question that I know you're not going to ask, the Riyadh Comedy Festival is also brought to you by Turki Al-Sheikh and the GEA. So, in fact, Turki Al-Sheikh was the one who announced the festival back in July, which was a detail that was confirmed by the Saudi Press Agency, which is the official state news agency operating under the government's Ministry of Media, and even has its own .gov domain. And when criticism for the Riyadh Comedy Festival reached its fever pitch, Turki Al-Sheikh responded by saying, Riyadh season will appreciate those who appreciate it. Essentially, if you don't talk about us favorably, then we won't treat you favorably, which means something. I feel like. Maybe it means a broken clock is still right twice a day. As an example of someone who did not appreciate the most appreciated Riyadh Comedy Festival, we have to look no further than Timothy Dillon, a personality who was supposed to perform at Riyadh but was fired ahead of the event over making jokes about slaves in Saudi Arabia. He even joked about the joke, making it seem like the slavery there was favorable. So he's being like, nice, you know?
What's your problem? Well, they have slaves, then they kill Hey. Get over it. Get over it. So what? So what they have slaves? So what?
Apparently, even making slavery seem favorable was too much for the Riyadh PR leadership to allow them to associate with Timothy Dillon. He was fired. They're basically running a funnier, worse version of the CCP's digital censorship wall, the Great Firewall. They seem really proud of it, and they acknowledge that it's bad, whereas the CCP is just like, no, that didn't happen. They're more of that kind of people, whereas the Saudis are kind of like, yeah. And so it's difficult to be more sure of what China actually wants you to see and not see, because they're kind of, lying and then they're very, very murky. Whereas with Saudi Arabia, it's very obvious. For example, slavery. They're, pretty popular amongst the Arab nations for slavery. They're known for that. By even talking about these and giving credence to any of this actually happening, I won't ever be able to go to Saudi Arabia, and neither will my loved ones, my employees, and probably not you. Let's just hope you don't live there right now. Watching this video is illegal. And if you happen to go like this and do some kind of agreeance with the video, 5 years in jail. So beyond the few examples we've briefly mentioned regarding Saudi Arabia's violations of human rights, there are numerous additional examples to discuss and further ways to expand on those we've already touched upon. For our first example, let's take the goal of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. The goal of this thing is to paint a picture of growth within the nation, multiple forms or facets of growth, financial, cultural, humanitarian, technological, even scientific. But unfortunately, over time, Saudi Arabia has been kind of moving backwards. In spite of all this shebang, the death penalty is something that has been commonplace throughout human history and still exists all over the globe to varying degrees. In the United States, it's largely reserved for only the most heinous crimes, and even then, death row inmates spend years, if not decades, behind bars before they get executed. Under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, they're frequent, incredibly fast, and they're only becoming more so. Between 2015 and 2022, Saudi Arabia recorded the 6 bloodiest years in its history under King Salman and the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, with executions averaging 129 annually. That is an 82% increase from pre-2015 levels. These are just people being executed. There can't be that many serial killers or horrible evil people, because that's cool. I mean, I'm down with that. As we briefly mentioned before, shortly after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in 2022, 81 people were put to death in one day alone. And many of those executed were citizens of other countries. Also, most of their slaves are migrants or citizens of other countries. Amnesty International attempts to track the injustices as best as feasible, but due to the secrecy and manipulations in the Saudi Arabian judicial system, the true number of those facing the death penalty is pretty hard to pin down. The number of executions between January 2014 and June 2025 was over 1,800 people, with roughly 1/3 of those being for strictly drug-related, non-violent offenses. That's crazy. I know a lot of people don't like the death penalty, but some people are just like, yeah, that guy's evil as and we caught him in the act. Kill him. These executions from Saudi Arabia are the opposite of that. And these are just the ones that have been made public by the official press agency, the SPA, which Amnesty International has tracked and analyzed. And of those executed for drug-related offenses, 75% of which were citizens of other countries. Execution for strictly drug-related offenses is a violation of international law, but Saudi Arabia is one of only 4 countries that continue to just execute people for drugs in 2024. What's crazy is that at one point they'd committed to ending drug-related executions. From 2020 to November of 2022, due to a moratorium from Mohammed bin Salman, drug-related executions were suspended, like we're waiting for Christmas.
It's just in.
Only 41 days until Christmas, and also, all drug-related executions have been suspended! As a result, in 2020, there was an 85% drop in the total number of executions for Saudi Arabia. And there's like as many people in Saudi Arabia as there is in Texas, okay? That's pretty scary. For a short time, it did seem that real change was being accomplished, and the promises to limit the use of the death penalty were being met. But when the clock ran out, the drug-related executions resumed, and Saudi Arabia set a new record for total executions back last year in 2024 with 345. And in a crazy ironic twist of fate, Saudi Arabia was trying to get one of those highly sought-after seats on the United Nations Human Rights Council. Kind of ironic, given the fact that they're just killing people for drug-related offenses. In 2025, things aren't slowing down either. In the first 6 months of this year, 180 people were executed, and of the 46 executions in June, just a few months ago, 37 of those were drug-related. And of those 37, 34 were foreign people. But once again, those are just public numbers that the state news agency has deemed acceptable, so I wouldn't trust them. Earlier, we drew a few loose comparisons between the censorship in Saudi Arabia to China's censorship, likening what Saudi Arabia does to the Great Firewall. I called it an inferior version, but that's only if you consider the attempt to completely block access to apps that the rest of the world commonly uses to exchange ideas and information. China's great at that. Saudi Arabia wants to be seen as a participant in the global community. They want to be seen as cool and Western and all that stuff. So rather than block access completely, it strictly monitors the social media use of their own citizens and the guests in the country. It would not be a lie to say that Saudi Arabia operates one of the most sophisticated surveillance states in the world, combining commercial spyware, totally legal stuff you could just buy, comprehensive internet censorship, and government-mandated tracking apps, all coupled with aggressive prosecution of online speech. NSO Group is an Israeli cybersecurity intelligence firm that has created a proprietary spyware called Pegasus, which is capable of being installed onto your phone without your knowledge and grants an attacker complete access to messages, photos, videos, microphone, camera, and more. Basically everything on your phone that they want, they can get. Thank you, Israel. It is a spyware that has become increasingly popular among governments seeking to silence critics and crush dissent before it can gain traction. And unsurprisingly, it's been reported that Pegasus spyware has been employed by Saudi Arabia and was even potentially used to track Jamal Khashoggi before he was killed. And of course, when this came out, NSO Group was quick to deny the claims, saying that their product was not in any way associated with the murder of any innocent people, especially not the murder of Khashoggi. Okay? And that they only sell their product to vetted governments for the purpose of saving lives. Makes sense. So they can say that, but I don't believe them. This is a magic spyware that is entirely undetectable, that requires 0 clicks to install, and according to page 30 of the product's description, once Agent is uninstalled from a certain device, it leaves no traces whatsoever or indications it was ever there. So their own product description basically says that they can just lie about it, and it's in their books and they're supposed to. And beside that, seemingly an entire contradiction to the statement from NSO is that reporting showed that Israel had even approved the sale to Saudi Arabia in an effort to improve relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia in an anti-Iran alliance, and that it was Saud al-Qahtani, the man mentioned earlier for his hand in killing Khashoggi, who had wanted access to Pegasus for their surveillance network. So it's a web, it's a love triangle. WhatsApp even won a lawsuit against NSO after Pegasus had been installed on 1,400 devices through WhatsApp's system, and that group was fined $168 million. Another software used to monitor and track citizens is available on the App Store, and it's advertised as a convenient way to access government services, but it is also being used to track and spy on people. The app is called Abshur, and it's on Google Play. Google, the official sponsor of Saudi Arabia. I couldn't find it on my iPhone. Abshur is a verified government entity. You can renew your driver's license, access your citizen ID, passport, manage appointments, pay fines, and navigate. And you can do the exact same with your dependents, which includes not just your children, but we'll get to that here in a minute. It also has tabs for your family and even coworkers, and this is where the potential issue comes into play. See, the app enables male family guardians to monitor and control women and children. It is a really wild application. Holy shit.
Under Saudi Arabia's male guardianship system, a man controls a woman's life from birth until her death. Every Saudi woman must have a male guardian, normally a father or husband, who has the power to make critical decisions on her behalf.
So maybe it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It allows a husband to see his wife, son, or daughter when they have maybe traveled out of Saudi Arabia to a neighboring nation? That seems cool. But it's more than that. Using Absher, men who are the guardians over their wives, daughters, and sometimes even mothers, have the power to deny permission to travel abroad or obtain passports. It has led to people being prevented from leaving the country, specifically women and especially those who are victims of domestic abuse, because it just allows a man to prevent his wife that he's abusing to leave. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And with that being said, there are some instances in which it's been argued that the Absher app has helped women escape, and that it's even an improvement over the previous methods the Saudi government used to enforce the travel of women abroad. Human Rights Watch has reported that women seeking to escape have been able to change travel permissions on their male guardians' phones and disable text message alerts on the app to prevent notifications from coming up when they leave, rather than the old system Saudi Arabia had, which was a permission card, like a child at school. And these documents required a physically signed document for travel approval, along with the length of time that they'd be traveling. It seems crazy. So with the updated technology not needing to travel to a physical location, a passport office to complete paperwork, those things made it more accessible for some women wanting to leave. With that being said, Human Rights Watch has only reported 3 cases where women successfully fled after accessing their guardians' phones to approve their own travel. So that's good, but with the good comes more bad. Women caught fleeing after changing their guardians' app settings face prosecution if they ever return to Saudi Arabia voluntarily or forcibly. So all the good was not from Saudi Arabia, it was just because phones have notifications that you can turn off and stuff. The dependent section in the app, which we mentioned earlier, doesn't just include children, it also corresponds to citizens of other countries who are in Saudi Arabia via the sponsorship of a Saudi citizen. So sponsors of these foreign workers can deny their sponsees from leaving the country, which has resulted in the exploitation of migrant workers and legal slavery. You can probably see how an employer having this level of control over its sponsors is it's human trafficking is what it seems like. Potential employers lure foreign people to their country and then they just get control over whether or not they can leave. So you lure to a prospective employee with promises of one job only to switch the job when the worker arrives, making them work in inhumane and in some cases fatal conditions. That's crazy. With FIFA set to come to Saudi Arabia in 2034, construction has intensified on the Vision Project as the government strives to create a tourist paradise for the world to marvel at. So who is working on these construction sites, my friends? Well, migrant workers with little to no safety precautions who can't leave unless their employers give them permission. Once again, the Human Rights Watch reported in December of 2024 that these giga projects were being built on widespread labor abuse. Migrant workers reported being paid for 2 months before paychecks stopped, and when asking for payment, one manager even responded, "Die first and I'll pay you later." So, if you're there for work, your employer has essentially complete control over your autonomy. And when workers try to leave or change jobs, employers reportedly have responded with things like this: "If we let you transfer sponsorship, we will have to let others do so as well." Some are even forced to pay their employer thousands of dollars to move jobs. And that's if you survive long enough or make enough to be able to even do so. Back in May, more reporting came out in regard to migrant workers from HRW, detailing that scores of migrant workers in Saudi Arabia have died in gruesome yet avoidable workplace-related accidents. It's like the 1800s in Saudi Arabia. Deaths stemming from electrocution, falling from buildings, crushing, and even decapitation, like those Chinese WorkSafe videos. And Saudi Arabia is labeling these deaths as being due to natural causes, COVID style. So if you're a migrant worker, a person in an abusive relationship, someone who just wants to say something honest about the way something is working poorly in Saudi Arabia, persecuted. But what about just women and minorities in general? They are obviously the most common targets of inhumane treatment, with women rights activists having faced extreme prosecutions and abuse for years. I'm sure you've seen some of those images and videos of women taking their tops off in protest. Amnesty International reported back in May that recruiters deceived over 70 Kenyan women, and when they arrived in Saudi Arabia, they were treated like slaves. Their passports were taken, their phones were held, their wages were withheld, and they were forced to work 16-hour days. Time off was denied, and they were prevented from leaving the house, along with facing verbal, physical, and sexual assault. So that is one such case of discrimination. Another minority group in Saudi Arabia that faces extreme discrimination is just Shia Muslims, who are not Wahhabists, who are not Sunni. They're Sunni and Shia. Those are the two main schools of thought in Islam. One believes there is elected caliphates, and then the other one believes that they argue over Muhammad's successors, basically, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. None of that's written down or documented or researched. I'm probably completely wrong. So with that in mind, remember the mass execution of 81 men back in 2022? 41 of those were Shia Muslims. And they make up roughly 12% of the population there, but are excluded from jobs and are the target of religious policies that could see Shiite and Sufi Muslims facing 20 years in prison for religious activities because practices or gatherings that could harm the unity or stability of the Sunni Muslim kingdom are forms of terrorism. This decree also deemed atheism to be a form of terrorism. So that is crazy. That is crazy shit. Other Muslim countries, which I don't know a lot about, a lot of them, but I know Lebanon is like equal parts Sunni and Shia, and some of our family came from Shia Lebanese, probably in Syria, I guess, a long time ago in the 1800s. Saudi security forces even went out of their way to demolish a mosque with a predominantly Shia community, which seems crazy. So yeah, a lot of terrible shit, but at least as of 2018, women can drive. Okay, guys, just don't try to leave the country if you're a woman. You have to get permission from your guardian, because you don't exist. Women can attend music festivals, sporting events, and WWE Super Slams, although if they are harassed or assaulted, they will face threats of further assault and harassment and imprisonment over even talking about the abuse that you might find at the WWE Super Slam. For example, Salma Al-Shihab is a mother, a women's rights activist, and a Shia Muslim who in 2021 was arrested by authorities over social media posts advocating for women's rights. Her sentencing for such a heinous act went from 6 years to 34 years, followed by a 34-year travel ban, which then dropped to 27 years, and then eventually dropped again to only 4 years. So I'm not really sure what they're trying to accomplish with their judicial system, but she was released from prison at the beginning of this year, but is still subject to an 8-year travel ban, and during her imprisonment, she faced solitary confinement as well as verbal abuse because of her membership of the Shia minority. Salma had committed the crime of dissent, calling for the release of other female activists like Lujain Al-Haflul. Lujain Al-Haflul's arrest is insane. She was arrested in May of 2018 for pushing for women to be able to drive, just weeks before women were allowed to drive in June of 2018, simply because she had undermined the kingdom's political system slightly before they changed it. And during Lujain's imprisonment, she was held at a maximum security prison where she was tortured, faced electric shock, was whipped, and beat. So yeah, and her torture sessions allegedly occurred in the presence of Saud al-Qahtani, a close aide to MBS, and again the man behind the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, which is the assassination that we will dig into now. Everything we've discussed so far makes Saudi Arabia look kind of like a shitty place to live. If you're a minority, Shia Muslim, a woman, a migrant, a person who isn't just a Saudi Arabian guy, it seems like. But there is an entire list of atrocities that we've only mentioned and omitted describing fully until now. Things that escalate the level of horror that comes out of Saudi Arabia. On October 2nd, 2018, Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to obtain marriage documents and was murdered within minutes of entering. Turkish intelligence recordings captured the entire killing, with transcripts now being released. A 15-member Saudi hit squad strangled Khashoggi with a plastic bag over his head as he pleaded, "I have asthma, do not do it, you will suffocate me." Then they dismembered his body with a bone saw over 30 minutes, and his remains were taken out of the country in 5 suitcases and were never recovered. So what would prompt such a violent and rapid removal of a Saudi citizen within a foreign nation's borders? Khashoggi had been a Saudi insider for decades, advising Prince Turki Al Faisal and serving as editor of Al Watan newspaper. Then speculation surrounding his resignation from Al Watan in 2010 suggested it may have been a forced resignation following articles about religious police and women's rights. Then his increasing criticism of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's authoritarian crackdown drove him into a self-imposed exile in the United States from June 2017. And from Washington, he wrote columns advocating advocating for press freedom and democratic reform in the Arab world as a whole, but specifically in Saudi Arabia. He'd written an article about MBS peddling revisionist history, and in the same article where he praised women being afforded the right to drive, he also criticized MBS for not doing more. And the last article of Khashoggi's that was ever published was a posthumous article from the Post received from his translator and assistant the day after his murder. And it represented perfectly the battle he fought and died for, saying that what the Arab world needed most was free expression. The hit squad that was sent to kill him consisted entirely of Saudi government operatives with direct ties to MBS, the betrothed to the crown or whatever, Ibn Saudi or whatever his name is. And according to an anonymous but seemingly well-informed and verified source who spoke with Middle East Eye, the team that had conducted the assassination was Tiger Squad, which is a group of the most highly trained and highly loyal intelligence and military operatives in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And the assassination of Khashoggi took place after the controversial arrest of Lujain. And the source told MEE that they have the belief that arresting critics will mount pressure on them, so that's why they started assassinating them quietly. The source also claimed that of the 15 men, 5 of them were personally selected by the Crown Prince, being his most loyal and trustworthy members of his personal security detail. The team was led by Mahir Abdulaziz Mutreb, who is a senior intelligence officer who regularly appeared in MBS's security detail on international trips. And on the day of the assassination, Mutreb's calls had been intercepted by Turkish intelligence, and 7 of 14 on that day were to the office of the Crown Prince, Salman. Before the killing had taken place at the time of Khashoggi's arrival in the consulate, the transcripts show Mutreb referring to Khashoggi as a sacrificial lamb of sorts, the animal to be sacrificed. So they obviously believe they were killing this journalist for the greater good of Saudi Arabia. The operation was overseen by Saud al-Qahtani, a senior advisor to MBS, who publicly stated he did not make decisions without the Crown Prince's approval, which is even noted in an assessment from the Director of National Intelligence that had investigated the extent of the Saudi government's involvements in the killing of Khashoggi. The DNI assessment found that 7 members of the Tiger Squad, which they refer to as the Rapid Intervention Force, had been part of the 15-member hit squad, and that they only answered to him and wouldn't have participated without his direct approval, which means it was at the leader of a country where you can go, a free country that's not North Korea, that's pretty much just North Korea. And maybe, I mean, honestly, it's just really North Korea. You can go there. The king was like, yo, kill that guy. He wants women to drive and he's really mean to me. That's unbelievable. It's cartoon villain shit. The assessment, which was finished on the 11th of February 2021 and declassified 2 weeks later on February 25th, included an executive summary stating, "We assess that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved an operation in Istanbul to capture or kill Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi." So that's crazy. And the response from Saudi Arabia was quite contradictory and involved multiple narratives. They initially denied Khashoggi ever died, and the kingdom claimed that on October 3rd, 2018, he left the consulate alive. Then, after overwhelming evidence emerged, Saudi officials admitted on October 19th that he was killed in a fist fight. Then on October 25th, they acknowledged it was premeditated murder, blaming rogue operatives. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has, of course, denied direct involvement, and even in 2019, he continued to deny his involvement in interviews while also trying to toe the line by saying he takes full responsibility. Which is so funny. He's very suave. You guys looked at him, the salmon guy? This salmon guy, he's very suave looking. It's crazy how evil he is. Later, the kingdom conducted a closed trial in Riyadh that some experts have said was a mockery of justice. It was performative, or giving the appearance of accountability being held while ensuring no consequences reach those at the top. Kind of like Saudi Arabia's Ruby Ridge in a sense. Plug to my own video, go watch that if you haven't seen it yet. The mastermind of the whole thing, Saud al-Qahtani, was never even named during the Saudi trial, though he did eventually become a pariah. So, that being said, if the reporting of him and Turki al-Sheikh being photographed together is legitimate, his exile is likely coming to an end. Fun fact, along the same vein of performative accountability, the United States response to the assassination of this man was also quite underwhelming. In mid-November of 2018, 17 individuals were sanctioned by the United States Department of the Treasury, including Saud al-Qahtani and Mutreb, along with 14 other Saudi government officials. Then the US Treasury Department issued a follow-up press release on February 26, 2021, conveniently the day after the DNI assessment was made public, featuring a quote from Secretary Yellen, which stated, "Those involved in the abhorrent killing of Jamal Khashoggi must be held accountable. With this action, Treasury is sanctioning Saudi Arabia's Rapid Intervention Force and a senior Saudi official who was directly involved in the murder of Jamal. The United States stands united with journalists and political dissidents in opposing threats of violence and intimidation. We will continue to defend the freedom of expression, which is the bedrock of a free society." Okay, so that seems well and good, but who was the senior Saudi official being sanctioned? It wasn't Crown Prince MBS. In spite of the fact that the DNI stated that he'd had a direct hand in authorizing the assassination in an assessment compiled weeks before and made public the day prior. Instead, it was the former deputy head of General Intelligence, Ahmed Hassan Mohammed al-Asiri, who had coordinated behind the scenes with Saud al-Qahtani to plan the operation. So essentially, these few individuals, excluding MBS, had their US property seized and were prevented from conducting business in America. You can't come here anymore. That's accountability for us, to be honest. This was all during President Trump's first term, and he further drove home his lack thereof actions, or actions, however you want to say it, by allowing Saudi Arabia to purchase billions of dollars of military equipment from us.
We're not going to give up hundreds of billions of dollars in orders and let Russia, China, and everybody else have them. It's all about, for me, very simple. It's America first. Saudi Arabia, if we broke with them, I think your oil prices would go through the roof.
And that we didn't want to lose that economic opportunity, potentially letting Saudi Arabia buy weapons from Russia or China, maybe filling our big giant hole we'd leave. Even further, Trump reportedly bragged to Washington Post reporter Bob Woodward that he'd saved Mohammed bin Salman's ass by getting Congress to leave him alone. So that's a pretty epic America win. And by the time Joe Biden got into office, Khashoggi's murder was years in the past, but the DNI assessment released during his presidency directly pinpointed MBS as responsible, bringing the assassination back into public consciousness. And while Biden's press secretary Jen Psaki claimed that the president intended to recalibrate our engagement with Saudi Arabia, it seems that never happened. It seems like their recalibration just means Joe Biden would ghost MBS and kind of be like, US officials said that they wouldn't be inviting him to visit, and Biden stopped taking his calls, instead talking to MBS father, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. And when Khashoggi's fiancée tried pursuing legal action against MBS over her to-be husband's murder, the Biden administration, in response, granted the immunity. And then Joe fist bumped MBS during a visit to Saudi Arabia. It is crazy, dude. The Saudis have been deep in the American coffers for a long time, all right? That's further in the video. We're gonna get to that. I'm hoping that the Saudis don't watch the rest. So the murder of Khashoggi is obviously a tragedy, and it had far-reaching effects. It demonstrated that even prominent journalists at major Western outlets are not safe from the government of Saudi Arabia. Let's take Turki bin Abdulaziz Al Jasser, a Saudi journalist and blogger who founded the news site Al Mashhad Al Saudi. He was executed in Saudi Arabia on June 14th, 2025 for treason and terrorism. He'd been initially arrested in March 2018, which was the same year that Lou Jane had been imprisoned and Khashoggi was murdered, and he was allegedly imprisoned for running a blog focused on corruption and civil liberties, as well as an anonymous Twitter account that was critical of the royal family. Al Jasser was detained for 7 years, subjected to torture, including beatings and electric shocks, and was tried in secret proceedings that violated international fair trial standards. The Committee to Protect Journalists said, the international community's failure to deliver justice for Jamal Khashoggi did not just betray one journalist, it emboldened de facto ruler Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to continue his persecution of the press, and today, another Saudi journalist has paid the price. Seems like Saudi Arabia has been allowed to go unchecked for so long because of the money that they give our politicians and people. It seems like it's too valuable for US government officials to risk jeopardizing the relationship when we make billions selling them our military hardware, and who the knows what else behind the scenes. Let's just be real, guys. If I were to ask if you'd be surprised to hear that the same military hardware we are flying into Saudi Arabia is also being used for more war crimes and human rights violation, a lot of our technology is used for that. Saudi Arabia launched a military intervention in Yemen on March 25th, 2015, leading a coalition that included the UAE, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, and other Arab states, with crucial support from the United States and the United Kingdom. It was justified as restoring the internationally recognized government of President Hadi after Houthi forces seized the capital Sana'a, and the intervention conducted was one of the most devastating air campaigns of the 21st century. Over 7 years, this coalition carried out 25,054 air raids, according to the Yemen Delta Project. That's an average of 12 attacks per day, and these air raids have resulted in the deaths of thousands of civilians directly and hundreds of thousands of civilians indirectly. The United Nations published a story detailing a heartbreaking loss of life when there were over 50 young boys, mainly under the age of 15, who were victims of a strike on their bus, and at least 21 of them died and 30 had been injured. In the same post, while condemning the strike on the bus, they outlined how this is but one of a larger number of deadly strikes on civilian targets as a result of this coalition, including a strike on a farm that killed 4 children, a strike on a motorbike that killed 2 kids, 2 more children were killed tending their sheep when a direct strike hit them. A hospital was also targeted in an Obama-style strike that killed 41 civilians, including 6 children. A fishing port, dock, and hangar full of fishermen and street vendors was targeted with a mortar strike. Another hospital was also targeted by mortars, with a shell landing in a busy street full of traffic with vendors and pedestrians everywhere. We're seeing the same thing around the world. We've seen this before. Many of these strikes on civilians are widely condemned for being blatant war crimes. For example, there was an instance of a funeral that was struck. Human Rights Watch called that an apparent war crime. And based upon photos of the scene with pieces of the bomb still bearing manufacturer markings, it was identified as a US manufactured bomb. More specifically, a Lockheed Martin GBU-12 Paveway 2, which is a 500-pound GBU. It's a laser-guided bomb. And beyond the killing of civilians, the coalition has used cluster munitions. They are weapons that scatter submunitions over vast areas that often fail to explode, leaving deadly hazards for years and years and years. They essentially become landmines. An entire city block, or the length of a street, or a field in a farm could be covered by one cluster munitions dispersal. And they're indiscriminate killers. Obviously, they're dumb as f. They just blow and anything that's there or whatever. They're very inefficient. There's a reason we don't use them. In 2008, there was a convention on cluster munitions, and a treaty resulted from the convention that made the danger that these munitions pose to civilians very clear to the nations of the world. And notably, of the 112 nations that approved the treaty and of the 107 that signed it, few countries are very absent. That's the United States, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, and Kuwait. Okay, essentially all of the members of the Saudi-led coalition against Yemen, plus the United States. So probably shouldn't be using cluster munitions in any place where there is going to be civilians at all ever. Probably shouldn't do that. The use of cluster munitions was confirmed by a Saudi coalition spokesperson in an interview with CNN in 2016. The spokesperson claimed that they'd only used the munitions one time, and that was against a camp in Hajjah that had vehicles. Can you guess who that Saudi spokesperson was? It was Major General Ahmed Assiri. Does that name sound familiar? It should. This is the same Ahmed Assiri with close ties to the Saudi royal family, who just 2 years after this interview in 2018 would be fired following the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, and later face sanctions from the United States in 2021. So we already went over the lies and changing stories surrounding that assassination, so anything that comes out of this guy's mouth is just horseshit. And the total death toll from the Yemen war is staggering and extends far beyond those killed in airstrikes. For example, in November 2021, the UN estimated that the number of deaths reached 377,000. It's also estimated that 70% of those killed would be children under the age of 5, with 60% of fatalities resulting from things like starvation and disease. And the United States, while not performing these strikes personally, was complicit in them, having continued arms sales to the coalition, as well as servicing their US-made aircraft and training pilots. The arms sales have been very controversial, which has led to several stoppages and some renewals. A $1.3 billion sale went through in 2015, and Obama halted parts of a sale in 2016 following concerns with the Yemen war and that there weren't enough children's hospitals being targeted. That's an Obama thing. Trump restored the arms sales in 2017, and in 2021, the Biden administration ended support of offensive operations by suspending some munition sales, but continued maintenance on aircraft. So it's like pretty wild. So while the Saudi-led coalition war in Yemen hasn't officially ended, and it's been going for 10 years, there are still pushes for peace. This war went on for quite a while until the UN brokered a truce deal in April of 2022. And around the time of this truce, another humanitarian crisis was building, and Saudi Arabia was facing more condemnation for human rights violations. This is the killings at the border of Ethiopia. Between March 2022 and June 2023, Saudi Arabian border guards killed at least hundreds and possibly thousands of Ethiopian migrants attempting to cross from Yemen into Saudi Arabia, according to a Human Rights Watch report published in August 2023 titled "They Fired on Us Like Rain." HRW documented the killings through 42 interviews with Ethiopian migrants and asylum seekers who had survived border crossings, and an analysis of over 350 videos and photographs, plus satellite imagery examination covering hundreds of square kilometers, with forensic pathological analysis by the Independent Forensic Experts Group. From 11 documented large group crossings involving 1,200 migrants, at least 655 died. From 9 additional crossings with 1,600 migrants, only 281 survivors could be accounted for. The Mixed Migration Center estimated 794 Ethiopian migrants were killed in 2022 alone, with 1,700 injured. And in the first 4 months of 2023, 75 more were killed and 226 more were injured. Satellite imagery identified 8 different burial sites near a migrant camp on the Yemen side of the border, and as of June 23rd, 2023, 287 graves were visible in these sites. And that is a significant increase from 183 graves documented in February 2022, showing the death toll growing throughout the documented period as a whole. Many more bodies were left unburied or buried in remote, unmarked locations that could not be captured in satellite imagery. And the methods used by Saudi border guards were ruthless. HRW documented 28 incidents involving explosive weapons, mortars, and rocket launchers mounted on vehicles fired at large groups of 50 to 300 migrants. And the explosive weapons caused horrific injuries. Survivors reported seeing people thrown on branches of trees, cut in two, losing body parts, and there are quite a few firsthand descriptions of the attacks that are disgusting. So it's absolutely horrible and documented, and the UN wrote a strongly worded letter expressing utmost concern over the cross-border killings, the use of artillery shelling, and small arms fire by Saudi security forces against asylum-seeking migrants and trafficking victims. They also called for an investigation, as neither Saudi nor Yemeni authorities had conducted one. It took 5 months for Saudi Arabia to respond, and when they did on March 2nd, 2023, you can see their response. They claim to take the allegations seriously, and they assured the public that Saudi border security ensures humane treatment according to international standards and are provided food as well as medical exams. So they refute the claim of a systematic pattern of large-scale, indiscriminate cross-border murders. And they just say that nothing ever happened. That's like what they do. They then claimed that the letter from the UN contains no dates, times, locations, details, information, or evidence to substantiate the allegations, and is just based off limited information provided. The Kingdom discovered no evidence to substantiate the allegations. So, like all their other investigations, they investigated themselves and found no wrongdoing. By the way, this video started off about being how people are mad at comedians for performing in Saudi Arabia. And we're trying to give reasons as to why people might be mad at these comedians for unabashedly performing in such a cesspit like Saudi Arabia. We have murdered journalists, we have human rights violations. We also have, at the very bottom of this list, involvement from Saudi Arabia in one of the greatest tragedies that America has ever faced, the world, pretty much. Because you can tie in the resulting war and everything, there's just a lot of bad that has come from all of this, obviously. By the way, I recommend researching all of this yourself. Anything you hear and you're like, I don't like that, just research it. Just look into it. Try to use multiple sources. Don't use your church as a source, preferably. Yeah, look into it. How about the Saudi plot for 9/11? 19 terrorists associated with Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial airplanes on the morning of September 11th, 2001, transforming fuel-loaded aircraft into weapons. American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center, United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower, and American Airlines Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, and United Airlines Flight 93 crashed in a Pennsylvania field after passengers fought to retake control. And none of it would have happened if Mark Wahlberg was there. I'm sorry, I have some kind of disease where I have to say that every time I talk about anything like this. Mark Wahlberg literally said he would have stopped 9/11. What an idiot. If we exclude the hijackers, the attacks killed 2,977 people directly, with 2,753 of those being in the World Trade Center towers and their surroundings. Beyond just the direct deaths, tens of thousands of people have faced long-term illnesses as a result of the attack, both mental illness and physical illness, and according to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, which pulls its data from the CDC, there were 352 chemical agents identified in the dust, because when you take a building, you turn it into dust, there's a lot of really bad shit. Not to mention all the deaths from the ensuing war, the decade of that, and just PTSD and the loss of life around the world. It's horrible. As a result of 9/11, the World Trade Center Health Program was created, and between 130,000 and 140,000 of the over 400,000 exposed during the attacks and the aftermath are enrolled in this program. And of those enrolled, there are some staggering numbers of certifications for World Trade Center related health conditions. Over 46,000 first responders and survivors have been diagnosed with cancers, over 40,000 diagnosed with chronic rhinosinusitis, over 37,000 diagnosed with gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, over 22,000 diagnosed with asthma, and over 16,000 diagnosed with PTSD. Tens of thousands more are diagnosed with other various conditions ranging from panic disorders, depression, lung disease, and even musculoskeletal disorders, all related to the World Trade Centers. This shows how the attacks didn't just reshape the landscape of America's safety precautions in airports, or how it's influenced racism against people from the Middle East and Gulf nations, or initiate what President Bush would call a global war on terror right after we watched his drive. It shattered the feeling of safety Americans felt while on US soil and has plagued victims with disease and illness for decades. It's overall terrible. And the official story is that the plot was orchestrated by Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden and operationally planned by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals, and that is a 79% composition of Saudis. So obviously, the Saudi connection has to be investigated. The Saudi connection was investigated, but the 9/11 Commission's 2004 report found no evidence linking the Saudi government to the attacks. So that's like for real. But if you look at the Gulf War and you look at what we had, let's just say there was unfinished business, and the Saudis would benefit heavily if we were to go back into the Middle East. And that's not what I believe, and that is definitely a conspiracy theory, but it is interesting if you were to play a game of Risk, or let's say Total War Rome, something like that, and you're trying to topple your enemies, in the Middle East. Anyways, back to the official real story, not the not real one that I just spoke about for a second. The official story has changed over the past 5 years. According to FBI documents declassified between 2021 and 2025, Saudi government officials operated a deliberate support network for the first terrorists who entered America before 9/11. The composition of the hijackers' teams revealed every flight had 3 to 5 Saudi nationals as a part of their respective hijacking team, and most had limited education and spoke little English. Then, several presented passports containing what investigators called suspicious indicators associated with Al-Qaeda, and at least 6 presented passports that had been manipulated in a fraudulent manner, and some of them just magically fell from a massively burning, decimated, fiery building. They just fell out of the sky magically, which is pretty cool. It was found that 2 hijackers may have obtained passports with help from a family member working in the Saudi passport office. And the first 2 hijackers to arrive in the US created the template for what would become a sophisticated support operation from Saudi Arabia. Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mindhar landed at Los Angeles International Airport on January 15th, 2000, immediately after attending an Al-Qaeda summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where the 9/11 attacks were reportedly planned. Both Hazmi and Mindhar were on American Airlines Flight 77, which is the plane that struck the Pentagon. The CIA tracked them at that summit, and the 9/11 Commission report even noted that a CIA desk officer guessed that something more nefarious was afoot. But they catastrophically failed to notify the FBI of their US entry for 16 months, not alerting domestic investigators until August of 2001, just weeks before the attacks. Their tracks had been lost in Bangkok, and CIA officials reportedly assumed that the meeting in Kuala Lumpur was called to plan attacks in Southeast Asia, not in America. And in March of 2000, it was identified that Nawaf al-Hazmi had departed on January 15th on a United Airlines flight to Los Angeles. That being said, the CIA did not try to register Mindhar or Hazmi with the State Department's tip-off watch list, the terrorist one. And this failure in intelligence enabled the Saudi support network to operate undetected throughout the hijackers' critical preparatory period in California. Hazmi and Mindhar were met by Omar al-Bayoumi, a Saudi grad student supported by his connections to the Saudi Civil Aviation Authority. The 9/11 Commission report in 2004 called him an unlikely candidate for clandestine involvement with Islamic extremists. They believe the story that this was just a sweet, devout Muslim man who spent his spare time in religious study, helping run a mosque, and who ran into Mindhar and Hazmi and helped them get settled in San Diego out of the goodness and kindness of his heart and through their shared culture. But he also conveniently happened to leave the United States weeks prior to the attacks on 9/11. The narrative collapsed under the weight of declassified evidence. In 2021 and 2022, FBI documents were released. These documents definitively confirmed that from 1998 until the 9/11 attacks, Bayoumi was paid a monthly stipend as a kupti of the Saudi General Intelligence Presidency via then Ambassador Prince Bandar bin Sultan. So, there you go. The 2017 FBI report states plainly, allegations of al-Bayoumi's involvement with Saudi intelligence were not confirmed at the time of the 9/11 Commission report. The above information confirms these allegations. Interestingly, Ambassador Prince Bandar bin Sultan had such a close relationship with then President George Bush that he visited the White House so frequently that he was often referred to by the nickname Bandar Bush. Also receiving payments from Prince Bandar bin Sultan was Osama Basnan, who received regular checks from Bandar Bush bin Sultan's wife. Notably, Basnan lived across the street from the hijackers and reportedly claimed to have done more for them than Bayoumi. The 9/11 Commission magically found no evidence that the money was redirected towards terrorism whatsoever. Back to Omar al-Bayoumi. His cover as a student may have been fairly elaborate, but it should have been obvious, but it wasn't during the time of the initial investigation conducted by the 9/11 Commission. According to declassified CIA documents, he supposedly did work for Dala Avco, a Saudi aviation company, but he was a ghost employee who never appeared at the Houston office, yet received monthly payments funded through the Saudi Ministry of Defense and Aviation. His salary was also irregular with varying amounts, and the documents even suggest that the son of the employee who signed his checks was an apparent member of Al-Qaeda and a possible second-wave hijacker. And the story of Bayoumi's chance encounter with Hazmi and Mindhar falls apart under a microscope. On February 1st, 2000, Bayoumi visited the Saudi consulate in Los Angeles for a meeting, then proceeded directly to a halal restaurant in Culver City where he encountered Hazmi and Mindhar. Supposedly, this was a coincidental encounter, but the 2016 FBI Operation Encore reports documents witness testimony stating that Bayoumi had been seen waiting by the window for the hijackers to arrive. And instead of only approaching them after hearing them speak with Gulf accents, as was the story Bayoumi had told, the witness stated that upon the pair's entry to the restaurant, Bayoumi approached them immediately and from a distance at which he wouldn't have been able to hear them speak. And what followed was comprehensive support that enabled the terrorists to establish themselves in America. Bayoumi found them an apartment in San Diego, co-signed the lease, and paid their first 2 months of rent totaling $1,550. He helped them open bank accounts, assisted with translation and travel. He even reportedly helped them find flight schools. And Bayoumi also introduced Hazmi and Mindhar to a support network through a party that was captured on video. The smoking gun is video footage from 1999 showing Omar al-Bayoumi conducting what appears to be pre-operational scouting of the US Capitol. He literally videoed himself casing potential targets, but the footage was hidden for over 20 years. The video meticulously documents security posts, entrances, exits, columns, structural features, and spatial relationships to the Washington Monument, the National Mall, and the Reagan National Airport. Bayoumi references the plan and states, "The working day is about to end. Theirs, of course, not mine," suggesting he is performing a work assignment. And at one point, he even says, "These are the demons of the White House." Bayoumi was even joined on this trip by 2 Saudi clerics with diplomatic status, and one of whom had lived with an Al-Qaeda member who reportedly supplied the satellite phone to bin Laden that was used to coordinate the bombings of US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. And it's believed that the US Capitol was the target for Flight 93, which was the flight that crashed in Pennsylvania following the passenger uprising against the hijackers. And if that's true, then Bayoumi was associated with the hijackers for the flight that hit the Pentagon and gathered intelligence for another of the 4 hijacked planes. So why was this hidden for so long, guys? It wasn't located in America. It was found in an apartment in the United Kingdom that Bayoumi had gone to after leaving the United States. The FBI or an intelligence agency didn't even release it. It was released through court discovery to lawyers representing the families of 9/11 victims. The timing of it is critical as well. The surveillance occurred within 90 days of when senior al-Qaeda planners were deciding on targets for 9/11. The 9/11 Commission report noted that planners included Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Mohammed Atta, and the attacker pilots, and all of them wanted to hit the Capitol. That is the quote. Also discovered in Bayoumi's UK apartment was his phone book containing the numbers of many senior Saudi officials and a drawing of a plane alongside a mathematical equation for calculating the rate of descent. Yet this video showing a confirmed Saudi intelligence agent casing the very targets that hijackers aimed to strike was never shared with the 9/11 Commission, somehow, nor with the FBI's own San Diego field office where the investigation was centered. Bruh, are you kidding me? And nobody knows this story, by the way. I haven't spoken to, well, a lot of people know this story, but nobody in real life knows it. The fact that this was missed during the 9/11 Commission is just another example of the appalling series of failures from the American intelligence apparatus that has no issues monitoring and around with its own citizens, but fails when needed the most, or just letting us know, or maybe it's because the Saudis are involved and we're, you know, there's an upper directive. That's what would happen in a game though, not real life. That would happen in like Total War Rome 2, Minecraft, City Skylines maybe. And working in tandem with Bayoumi was Fahad al-Thumairi. Al-Thumairi, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce that one, all right? Al-Thumairi served simultaneously as an accredited diplomat to the Saudi consulate in Los Angeles and as an imam to the King Fahd Mosque in Culver City. The then Crown Prince Abdulaziz had funded this mosque, so lots and lots of direct connections. The 2016 FBI Operation Encore report documents that Al-Thumairi tasked an associate to assist the hijackers, telling this trusted parishioner that Hazmi and Midhar were 2 very significant people more than a year before the 9/11 attacks. So based on how human communication works, this statement indicates advanced knowledge of the hijackers' importance to al-Qaeda operations. Phone records document 67 calls between Al-Thumairi and al-Bayoumi in the period surrounding the hijackers' arrival and support operations, with their final contact occurring on September 2nd, 2001, just 9 days before the attacks. It seems like more information has come out in regard to the truth of what actually happened from the American legal system being used by the victims of 9/11 and their legal teams. More has come out from them than the US government's various investigative bodies and counterterrorism units. There's been more transparency from just lawyers who represent victims. That's crazy. So much has come out that a federal judge decided in September that the families could bring a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia for their aid and sponsorship of the hijackers that caused and did 9/11, all right? Bashar Bush. Our old buddy Bush. The judge even denied Saudi Arabia's attempts to have the lawsuit dismissed. Shockingly enough, the highest level official within the Saudi government with ties to 9/11 was revealed accidentally through a Justice Department failure to redact his name in FBI documents properly, guys. How about that shit? Musaid Ahmed al-Yara. This guy served as the director of Islamic affairs at the Saudi embassy in Washington from 1999 to 2000 and reported directly to Ambassador Prince Bandar bin Sultan, aka Bandar Bush, and was a confirmed officer of Saudi intelligence services. How the does this not look like the Saudis just did it and we just let them? How does this not, why is that not the official story? Because it's crazy. And that's what you would do in Total War Rome 2. The 2012 FBI report states there was evidence that al-Jarrah tasked both al-Thumairi and al-Bayoumi with assisting the hijackers, making him the operational commander of the Saudi support network. So the fact that this high-level individual who had been instructing those supporting the hijackers was having his name redacted from intelligence documents is f***ing outrageous. But especially Brett Eagleson, a spokesperson for 9/11 families, who said, "Our government has been fighting us tooth and nail to prevent the release of this name, and now, lo and behold, we know his name. What about this is a state secret? Why would our government go to such lengths to protect this guy? This proves it's a giant cover-up to protect the Saudis." And it absolutely does. Our government covered up details of 9/11 to protect the Saudis. What? Why would we do that? Why would we do that, guys? Probably oil. Or whatever the trope is. Jarrah left the United States in 2005 when FBI scrutiny scared him off, and now reportedly works at Imam Muhammad Ibn Saud University, where apparently numerous Al-Qaeda figures have studied, including 4 of the 9/11 hijackers. Given all the crimes against humanity and human rights violations, even as recently as 2024, 2025, is it really that hard to believe that they're involved, like everybody's been saying and been labeled a conspiracy theorist for the last 30 years that most people don't even know about? Nah, I wouldn't say, but only in city skylines. The whole foreign involvement rabbit hole is a pretty big one though. And one of the craziest details surrounding all of this is that the families whose lawyers have made enough of a stir by providing evidence to show that they can send a lawsuit against Saudi Arabia for their complicitness in 9/11, that suit will just be a civil suit. A civil suit is the best thing that we can do as recompense for a terrorist attack that killed thousands of people directly and potentially tens of thousands more indirectly. So the recompensation for thousands of direct deaths and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of indirect deaths from 9/11 is the families getting a civil suit against Saudi Arabia. Pretty epic. So when people criticize celebrities for going to the Riyadh Comedy Festival, the Mildebeest Music Festival, or criticizing athletes for joining Saudi-owned sports teams, or criticizing companies for selling their companies to the Saudi PIF, people are not complaining and mad because of whatever poorly cooked response a target of this criticism might give. For example, Bill Burr's sanctimonious statement. Bill Burr called his critics sanctimonious cunts who don't sincerely give a shit, so he's calling them phony for calling him out. And part of Dave Chappelle's performance was to say that it's easier to talk in Saudi Arabia than in the United States, and Aziz Ansari was asked about his participation by Jimmy Kimmel and said that not all people agree with what the government is doing. He thinks it's wrong to attribute what the government does to the people who live there, which is definitely true, and you could say that about China or North Korea. Louis C.K. defended it and said it's a positive thing. And honestly, I don't get it. I don't really understand why you would ever want to do that, if not just for money, and if you just value money more than humans, I guess. These people are total cucks of a government that assassinates journalists and was involved in 9/11 or whatever. Also abuses migrant workers, turns them into slaves, and just kills migrants and, amongst everything else. It's pretty fucked up. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think down below. Do you think I'm all in the wrong on this one, or do you think I'm totally in the right? Is this another Mormon situation? Smash the like button and go to thegump.club to watch uncensored videos with cool behind-the-scenes content. And probably the 9/11 stuff, I'm gonna have to go through that with a fine-tooth comb, all right, guys? Because I said some crazy shit. Press the like button to see you in the next video.
Anyways, go to gump.club to get these awesome perks.